It's been a week now of renting the Sony A6700, and per the specifications of oversampled 4K 60 from the 6K sensor, the pixel for pixel 4K 120, the 1080p 240, and the IBIS all for $1,400, I think this is perhaps the most feature-rich camera in its price range. And except for one thing, it's the low resolution viewfinder. And I didn't even realize or sort of keep in mind how important a good viewfinder is until I used this camera. It actually wasn't since the 2.3 million dot OLED viewfinder of the Panasonic S5 Mark I that I realized how frustrating it is to have a lower quality one. I've been shooting mostly Nikon cameras for a while now, even though I've rented practically every modern mirrorless camera. And they pretty much, besides their lowest end range, all have the 3.6 million dot OLED displays. And I never had an issue with them. I never even really put a lot of thought into it. But going from that 3.6 to 2.3 might not seem very significant, but at least to me, when you do look through it, everything looks very pixelated to the extent of looking like an old pixelated Game Boy, for example. And I'm so taken aback by this that I ended up adjusting the diopter quite a few times just to make sure that it wasn't out of focus for my eyesight, and it simply wasn't that. I mean, and it's not just the pictures coming through the lens that you can't see in complete detail. All the ISO, the frame rate, all your settings that you see above and below uh, in the viewfinder, ISO and such, all that looks very pixelated. And even like I use the feature of the horizon leveling system, and that like it gets really stepped and blocky because there's just not enough resolution to represent it in a nice, fine straight line when it's at a slight slant. And maybe this isn't going to be too much of an issue for other users, or maybe other users haven't even recognized this issue. But if you are using the camera for 8, 10 hour days on set, like I do, it becomes really frustrating really quick. And if anything, I found it a lot more straining on my eyes because you're not looking at something that appears to be highly in focus. And I wasn't even sure if my images were completely in focus if it weren't for the little green squares and the beep that you get when the autofocus system locks on focus. But just because the camera is saying that, you're still, it's a little nerve-wracking, especially on a paid gig, for the camera to say it's in focus, but then just not being sure until you see it on a larger, higher resolution display. Now, with all this said, if this is not an issue that you've recognized while using the camera or any of the previous A6500, A63, A6200, no, A6100, A6000, whatever the previous models were, then I would say, bar none, this is the camera to get. If you're not planning on getting a full frame camera, if APS-C is good for you, but if you're someone who's very pedantic and really puts a lot of importance on the experience of shooting with the camera, how the camera feels, the build quality of it, the material used, uh, I'd highly recommend you rent this camera, see for yourself before buying it.